Hello there, everybody. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Kristen. It's wonderful to be here. And I would like to start off by finding out a little bit more about who is here with me today. So I'd like to ask you to please go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourself and your current teaching context in the chat box. I'd like to know, are you teaching online? Are you back in the classroom? Perhaps it's a hybrid situation. Perhaps you're still online. What age groups are you teaching? Are you a teacher? Are you a coordinator? Who have we got with us today? Any information like this would be extremely useful to me. While you're doing that, and I'll keep my eye on the chat box, I would like to tell you a few things, a few extra things about me. As Kristen said, I've been dedicated to ELT for a long time now. You might be able to tell from my accent, but I'm originally from Australia, but I'm in Sao Paulo in Brazil. And anyone who knows me will tell you just how passionate I am about teaching kids, but I'm also equally passionate about connecting with other dedicated ELT professionals like yourselves. That's why it's such a pleasure to be here with you today to talk about a topic that I think is just so important. Now, these days I work almost exclusively with teacher education and providing support and guidance from many different places in the world, but particularly here in Brazil. And if you've been following the news, you will know that the situation here in Brazil continues to be extremely difficult for educators, for students and their families. So I'd like to say really special thank you to all of the effort that teachers are putting in every single day. And I'm really honoured that you take the time to be here to watch this webinar with me. Specifically in this webinar, what we're going to be talking about, the topic is engagement of families, but what we're talking about specifically, let's jump to the next slide. I'd like to look at the new role that families have, the way the role in education has changed, and it's been the pandemic that's changed this. So what might this mean for schools now and in the future? And then we're going to have a look at what research tells us are the main barriers that get in the way of building these trusting and effective partnerships between home and school. And then I'd like to focus in on what is considered to be the foundation for engaging families in the school community, and that's relationship building. And it wouldn't be a workshop with me or a webinar with me if I didn't include something really practical. So I'd like to dedicate a good portion of today to looking at actionable strategies that teachers and school management teams can use to establish these trusting relationships with families. And the objective at the end of the day really is to encourage greater engagement, of course, but ultimately greater outcomes for student learning. So that's what today is all about. I hope that sounds good. So looking over here at the comments, I can see we have a very wide range of different teaching contexts and modes of delivery. We've got people who are still teaching online. We've got people teaching very young learners, primary and secondary school teachers. We have got online at primary schools. We have got more preschoolers. Okay, we've got some hybrid, some teachers who are doing both online and also giving classes in person with physical distancing. We've got some materials writers here as well. What a great group. Okay, this is really interesting for me to know, and I'll be calling on you throughout this session to participate in the chat box, and I'm looking forward to seeing your answers. So let's jump in. Like I said, these days I work almost exclusively with teacher education, but you know what, since the start of the pandemic, I've found myself in an interesting position professionally and personally. And I think this has given me a rather unique insight into the topic of family engagement and education. Let me tell you why. You see, a major part of my week is spent working side by side with teachers to support them professionally and often emotionally. They come to me with their problems and their concerns. We plan lessons collaboratively. I observe them teaching. I support their ongoing professional development. I feel very connected to teachers and what they're going through. But I also work closely with school management teams. So I get a look in at the struggles that the coordinators are facing and the huge demands that are placed on them from all sides at the moment. And of course, finally, I am also a working mother. I know firsthand just how hard it's been for families to cope during the pandemic. So as you can see, I really am in this sort of unique position, I think, of having empathy and understanding for all of the stakeholders, educators, schools, and families. And it's from this position that I would like to talk to you today about the importance of developing these strong family-school partnerships. So I've always believed that this is important, but right now, more than ever, I can clearly see just how essential this is to the success of any remote learning, online learning, hybrid learning teaching experience. And I hope that the lessons that we're learning now will bring about lasting changes in the future. So I really have prepared this talk from this sort of place of empathy, but also of hope. You know, we know, there's no doubt about the important role that parents and caregivers play in their children's school lives. Researchers have been telling us this for decades. So it's not new. But what do I think? I suspect that up until now, it's been much easier for teachers to kind of just get on with it and for parents to just kind of leave us to it. Well, when almost all the world's schools stopped face-to-face learning in 2020, engaging parents and families very quickly became the #1 priority. Is it a #1 priority for you? Just out of curiosity. Give me a yes or no in the chat box there. How many of you truly believe that family engagement should be a top priority in the primary and pre-primary education system? Let's have a look what people are saying over here. Yes, a top priority, absolutely, fundamental, I agree for sure, yes, yes, yes. Can't write enough zeros. Excellent, excellent. I suspected as much, but I'm asking you this question now because I'll be asking you another question shortly, and I'm curious to get a comparison of your answers. Well, Rachel Winthrop, she's a researcher at the Center for Universal Education. She and another team put together this survey of 25,000 parents from across 10 countries. And it was on families' beliefs, their motivations and sources of information regarding their children's education. Now, it's really interesting research, and I have cited this research in the last slide. So anyone wanting to check this out really should. It was really up to date, a very large scale research project. And they've done this online brief of the results of the survey. And they report that while most schools struggled to make this change to remote learning, those schools that had already established these strong relationships to families before the pandemic, these were the schools that were able to adapt quickly and more successfully to the new situation. I love this quote here about the predictors of student achievement in schools. And I know it's something that we all know already, but it's a really good reminder of just, we're not just talking about developing these relationships and partnerships with families because it makes our lives as educators easier. We're talking about getting the results, better results for our students and from our students. So I think it's really important to remember that these schools that have already established really good relationships with families did do better when the pandemic hit. It's just a fact. And I've seen an excellent example of this in practice. There is a small local school called The Secret Garden on an island called Florianopolis. It's run by a woman called Lucy Crichton. She's actually another National Geographic writer and speaker. You might have met Lucy. Family engagement at her school has always been a priority, and I've seen the way she has led. She's been a real leader, I think, in her school, but she has co-created so many beautiful things during the pandemic in collaboration with families. And I think it's just a really nice example of this theory being or working in practice. Now, let's move on. It seems like, from the question that I asked you earlier, it seems like the concept of a strong homeschool link is something that we all love. But I want to know now, and this is my second question, how many of you feel that the schools or institutions that you work on have really had a successful experience? Or let me reword this question. How many of you feel that family engagement is an integral part of what the school does? Not just superficially, but actually embedded into everything they do. Give me a yes or no in the chat box. How many of you are working at schools where family engagement is happening? Okay. Oh, it's a bit of a mixed response here, which is interesting. It should be mostly yes. We were really engaged. Yes, no, no, yes, no, yes, yes, partially. Strong relationship with the parents at a Christian school. No, for sure. Mostly yes. Not enough engagement. It's a very mixed amount of responses. Not really as it should be, but satisfactory. Okay. Well, I'm curious to know a little bit more about how these schools are engaging these families. It's really interesting. I think it's really important, you know, I think it's really important. And this is why we need families support right now. We really do. But they also need ours, you know, and I think this is something that we need to keep in mind as we move forward. It seems to me like an incredible shame that even though this is the #1 priority for everyone here watching, it feels like perhaps we love this in theory, but implementing it in an effective and meaningful way is easier said than done. Educators and families all want the same thing at the end of the day, don't they? They want the success of our children in their learning and their development and throughout their school life and beyond, of course. But there are factors which get in the way. So let's have a look at what the reasons that educators and families have struggled to build trusting and effective partnerships. And I'd say in general, this is true, that since the pandemic hit, we have seen that there is not enough partnership between families and homes, and it's caused lots of problems. Let's have a look at what these barriers are. Now, when I'm referring to these, or these bullet points that you see here, these have come from the dual capacity building framework for family school partnerships, and it's really worth checking out. Again, I will reference this in my last slide. According to the framework, which is based on research and collaboration with families, there are specific factors, and we can look at these factors from the point of the educator, first of all. Let's face it, young learner teachers are not given training on the importance of family engagement in the language learning process. In fact, many schools where I've worked, I've been actively discouraged from speaking to families and excluded from many of the events that take place at the school, such as the open house. I sort of had a very secondary and superficial role. I wasn't invited to participate in family conferences. And I think this is true for many teachers in similar situations. I've also never been exposed to strong examples of family engagement. I don't think I've ever worked at a school where this was really a key part of their program. Rarely have educators had this opportunity, either in a professional or a personal capacity, to experience what happens when there is this strong school community. And I think when teachers are encouraged to take part, these initiatives are often very traditional, and we're going to be having a look at this as well. When we talk about engagement, there's a difference between family engagement and family involvement in the school. Now, a lot of traditional forms of getting the families involved are things like bringing them along to an event at the end of the term. Maybe it's an end of year concert. I know that how many of us have had to teach our students a song in English for them to perform at the concert. These kinds of things are rarely effective in building the kind of partnerships with families that could really be beneficial to the child's language learning process. I'm not saying that they don't have value. I'm just saying they are superficial. In terms of developing partnerships, I think a lot of these failed attempts to engage families might cause teachers to doubt the importance of building relationships with families. And that could be the reason why we see so many deficit mindsets. And often the reason for failure is often placed on the families. And we're going to have a look at that just now. I'm going to also encourage you to take a look at the work by Dr. Karen Mapp. Karen Mapp. I'll write her name in the comments here for you. Dr. Karen Mapp is one of the women who put together this framework, and she has done given amazing talks on the framework and on, this is her specialty area, and I think that her work is fascinating and really practical and useful. So if you're interested in learning more about this, do check it out. Now, I want to show you some quotes, real quotes from teachers, and these are things that teachers have shared with me about their experience with families, and I wonder how many of you can relate to some of the following. Have a read of some of these. Do any of these sound familiar? So these quotes came from the very start of the pandemic, when teachers were first forced to take their classes online. I can empathize so much with these teachers, and I'm sure many of you have experienced or perhaps even said something similar. It certainly is challenging, and it's not just challenging for teachers. You know, we've seen families making unrealistic demands. We've seen parents not reading messages or emails. We've seen unhelpful or even aggressive comments about the whole situation. We've seen adults interrupting live lessons to talk to the teachers or complain. Parents being unavailable to help their children with classwork. No involvement or communication at all with the school. So it can often feel, and this often falls on the shoulders of who? Of our coordinators, who are juggling the demands from teachers, students, school directors, families. It's a lot that's going on. There's a lot of really, there are a lot of strong tension points. But let me now turn to parents. Look here in the comments. Can you see there in the comments? I hope you're keeping your eye on these comments as well, because the participation here is always so rich, and it's so interesting to see people in different parts of the world all going through the same thing. But there are barriers that are preventing families. There are reasons why there is this clash between family and school. And if we look at it, we have to recognize that families often lack experience or models of strong family engagement, either growing up or as parents themselves. Some families have even had very negative experiences. Sometimes their attempts to connect to the school may have been rejected. Mine have at times. I know that many families feel this sort of lack of initiative from the part of the school to reach out to families. And in the worst case scenario, some even feel disrespected, unheard, and unvalued. But listen, I think it's important for us to acknowledge what these barriers are and see with empathy both sides what might be preventing these successful connections. But let me tell you this, only focusing on the barriers won't help us to move forward. We need to look at ways of improving our family engagement and student achievement. And yes, there are plenty of tension points between school and home. I know that. But the most powerful thing that we can do right now is to look at specific and actionable ways to improve the situation. So that's what we're going to do. Now, I think this is the perfect moment to have a look at this difference between involvement and engagement. And at this point, I want to share a bit of a personal story with you all. I personally have felt so frustrated watching my son struggling to adapt to the new at-home format his school adopted. He's fallen behind with his schoolwork, and this has made him stressed with the whole situation. He often cries. He cries because he feels like he can't catch up. We are working every day during the week and even Saturdays to try and get on top of his schoolwork. And I've told his teacher this, but the classwork keeps coming, keeps getting posted every day, and he never seems to be able to do enough. And the answer that I've gotten is that they have to share this much content because they need to minimize how much the students will lose during this period. What they don't seem to have understood is that my son is losing. He's losing opportunities to learn because he's an 11-year-old child and he is not mature enough for this level of responsibility regarding his learning. And I feel angry. I feel angry not because the school doesn't seem to be getting it right, and they don't seem to be getting it right, but I can understand that. This is new for everyone. I, of all people, can feel lots of empathy for the school in terms of how to deliver the content. I know it's difficult. I'm angry because it feels like I'm not being heard. Now, just like my son's school, many educators and school management teams feel that they're already doing their bit, that engagement is happening because they're involving the parents. They're trying to involve the parents. They're reaching out. They're sending emails home regularly to families to keep them updated. Whenever there's a problem, they arrange a meeting to talk when there's a problem. There might even be a special app that the school has that parents can use to talk to the coordinator if they need help. The thing is, what research tells us and what this whole experience has taught me is that these actions alone are not enough to create the kind of school family connections that are going to raise student achievement. For this remote teaching and learning hybrid physical distancing experience to be a successful one, we can and we must go beyond these traditional forms of engagement. So this is the difference between involvement and engagement. I really like this quote from Larry Falazzo, and he uses this sort of analogy to describe the difference. A school striving for family involvement often leads with its mouth. So these are the schools that, perhaps your school, identifying projects, needs, goals, and then telling the parents how they can contribute, what they should be doing. But a school striving for engagement, on the other hand, leads with its ears. It actually listens to what's going on at home. It wants to know what parents think, what they dream, what they worry about, what they hope for the year, what they expect from the school, what they need. Now, don't get me wrong, I think both involvement and engagement are useful. We could even perhaps see parent involvement as the first step towards engagement. But engagement is what we need. Engagement is what's going to bring about partnership. And this is what we're looking for if we're going to improve the effectiveness of what we're doing. Just like the example that I gave about my son's school, I think educators can get involved and support families but guiding them. I think this is not enough. There needs to be also time devoted to listening to parents and caregivers and learning from the insights that only they can give us about what's happening at home and what may be affecting what's happening at school. So having thought about that, or having said that, let me just take another quick look at have a look at the comments here. Yes, I see lots of comments from teachers who are feeling like that they are not getting the kind of engagement or the kind of response that they want from families. I'm just having a bit of trouble getting my cursor here. Here we go. So I can scroll down and have a read. Parents are often ready for everything regarding their children, except helping teachers and educating their children. Okay, when I read things like this, most parents don't attend school. It falls on the teacher's shoulders. Parents blame us for even the timetable. Parents say they don't know English and they can't help their child. Parents tend to interfere too much in the educator's work, folks. You know what I'm hearing when I read all of this? What I'm hearing is there is a really deep problem in the relationship between home and school. And we're going to have a look at that just now. Let's take a look at the next slide. Once we've established the barriers, we know what they are. Once you've identified, and you need to do that by listening to your families and listening to your teachers and having a real genuine conversation about this. Once you've identified this, we can move on, we can move forward, and we can have a look at starting to build what, again, this is from the dual capacity building framework, has been considered to be essential conditions for making this work. And we're going to talk about that now. Specifically, what I would like to do is look at the very first item on this list. Look how related it is to what's going on in the comments here. You'll find that this has been repeated over and over and over again by researchers and educational leaders all around the world, and it's the importance of relationships. Trusting and authentic relationships are the foundation of absolutely everything. Without it, it is very hard to make any of these engagement initiatives work. When you're asking families to participate in their children's education, when you're asking them for support, when you're asking them for patience, you need to have first established a really good relationship with them in order to be able to demand anything. And vice versa. I think this goes two ways. So in the next part of this talk, I'd really like to lean into this idea of relationship building with families. Obviously, in a short workshop like this, we couldn't possibly attempt to cover everything that we need in this list of essential conditions. So I really want to focus on some practical suggestions on how you can lay this foundation. And we're going to look at relationship building. I'm going to go through 8 tips. This is tip number 1 right here. If you're like me, you'll probably love to take some notes. I love watching webinars and taking lots of notes. But if you're unable to take notes, don't worry. I have actually got a handout that I thought would be useful to send along to everyone who has signed up for this workshop. So you'll be getting a PDF handout with all of these tips on it as well after the webinar's over. So let's get this started. Tip number 1 is about sending something home to families at the start of the year or start of the term. We're about to head into a new term. This could work equally well at the start of a new term. But you really want to set a positive tone for the beginning of a school year or term. And as we know, good relationships are built over time, right? And they are based on respect and trust. And you will hear those two words over and over again throughout these tips that I'm giving you. We're trying to focus on respect and trust. And you can start this process now. You can think of ways, culturally appropriate ways, to reach out to the families of your students. I'm going to give you a few examples. A start of the year or start of the term message to say how much you're looking forward to collaborating with them and supporting their children throughout the school term or throughout the year. Also, an email to them would be really useful. And why not share your hopes? What are your expectations? What do you hope to achieve by the end of a certain period? Invite them to share theirs as well. So you are leading with your mouth, but also with your ears. Also, I think it's really important to send out an invitation for them to give you feedback. Don't wait for them to start complaining. Take the initiative, ask them to give you feedback about the term so far, and ask them for suggestions. Don't let them just jump on the complain train. If they're going to be giving you criticisms about things that they would like changed, ask them to come up with possible solutions as well, and really listen to those solutions. So the next tip I'd like to give you is to get to know your students, parents, and caregivers. And for some of you, this might seem obvious, but you would be surprised at how many teachers don't know the names of their students' parents or caregivers or the most important adults in their lives. Remember that conversations with families shouldn't only be focused on admin and student progress. From day one, I think it's important to make an effort to get to know the families of your students. It can be something really simple as well as learning their names and showing interest in them as people and not just as parents. So here's a couple of examples of ways you can do this. And the first one, again, is obvious, but not many people do it. Have you got a list of your students and then the names of their parents and caregivers? It's a great way to learn their names. Be present and available. I think this is really important too. Being there before and after class whenever possible, or making time inside the class, just looking for opportunities to chat with the adults who drop them off at school, or maybe the adults that appear on screen, even if it's just a quick hi, how are you? Look them in the eye, smile. Easy, but so powerful. Send home a video. This is particularly good for situations where perhaps you have a lot of students that you are under your care and you couldn't possibly find time for making individual connections. Create a video, introduce yourself, and invite families to do the same for you. Slide 3. Sorry, tip number 3. I think it's really good to find out relevant information about your students' home context, okay? After the year that we had in 2020, a lot has changed for many families. And some of these things will directly impact the way students feel about school, their social emotional skills, their academic ability. In 2021, I think schools should really start by inviting families to share what's going on at home. Have they lost family members? Have they been affected financially? How has the child been adjusting? This is the kind of background information that can help educators and school management make much better decisions about how to support families and students in this new school year and this strange new context we find ourselves in. So tip 4 is about being the voice of reason and reassurance. This goes back to trust as well. From the very beginning, you should really show parents that you are prepared, you are professional, and you're ready for the new challenges that this year will bring. Reassure them with words and with actions that you're reliable and that you're committed to working in partnership with them to make 2021 a success. Here are a couple of things that you might like to do. And these are things that I have done pre-pandemic that could be adapted for the current context very easily. Meetings, informative meetings at the start of the school year. to propose this idea of homeschool partnership. It can be hard sometimes to get families in. It can be hard to get them online. So I liked to use sort of clickbaity kind of attractive titles for my meetings, things like 5 ways to support your, or 5 ways to help your child become bilingual. These kinds of titles are really attractive to parents who are committed to helping their children, or have made the initial effort, at least, have shown that they have an invested interest in their children learning a foreign language or an additional language. So these kinds of meetings were always very popular. But what it really was an opportunity for me to bust a couple of myths that a lot of families hold about what they can expect from this language learning process in the early years or in primary school. So it was also a chance for me to show them that I was the professional in the room, that I wasn't just an Australian who'd stepped off the plane and wanted to teach English, that I knew what I was talking about. I'd studied this topic. And so that sort of helped them, again, back to that word trust that I knew what I was doing. And then, of course, I would listen to them. What were their expectations? What were they hoping for? And it would become a really lovely meeting, which became more like a conversation. And then finally, I would propose that we work together towards these goals. Meetings like this are great for relationship building. And you can be sure that if you run a successful meeting like that at the start of the year, where parents leave feeling great, feeling that they'd been heard, those parents are going to be in those WhatsApp parents groups telling everyone about it. And I'm sure that the next time you have a meeting, it'll be, the attendance will be a lot higher. So I think that really a key there is to educate parents by sharing research-based information. Have them trust you as a professional. It is a really important step in building this relationship. And of course, asking for and responding to feedback regularly is really helpful as well. So tip number 5 is about choosing an appropriate channel of communication. I just want to know, at the schools that you're working in, what is the channel of communication that is being used at the moment? I see that Maria here has got emails, phone calls, and personal meetings. Wow. Zoom, Viber, emails. Okay, phone calls, WhatsApp, emails. WhatsApp, a lot of WhatsApp teams. Okay, so families can contact teachers or contact schools via these channels. WhatsApp only. Oh, Seesaw. Phone, Zoom. Okay, this is interesting. This is good. I mean, this has always been important, of course, but these days it's become essential. This finding a user-friendly and reliable channel of communication, it's essential. You know, without it, it becomes incredibly difficult to maintain a good relationship with families if they can't contact you. I think it used to be a lot easier when we could just go into the school, but now it's a lot more challenging. And I'll tell you why. When you're in situations where you have email, phone, you might have an app, you might have a WhatsApp group, you might have sort of all of these different channels of communication, it can be hard to follow up. It can be hard to sort of, you know, you remember that so-and-so's mother, you know, Billy's mother sent a message to you about something, but you couldn't quite remember what it was that she wanted. And you're trying to find the message. And is it on WhatsApp? Is it in my email? Is it on the platform? Well, it becomes really difficult. So my suggestion, my tip here is to make sure that you've chosen a single channel of communication. And when I was speaking to another group of teachers about this, one of them said, that channel of communication, I can't just have one, because the channel of communication that is best for one family might not be best for another. And I can completely understand this kind of situation. But I think if for families as well, if each family knows how this one channel of communication for connecting with you, this is how I can do it, then that is going to help improve a lot this regular ability for them to communicate back and forth. because regular updates are useless if no one's reading them or nobody's able to respond to them. So think carefully about how that channel of communication is working. And here's another thing. If you do use something like a new technology, a new app, a new tool, a new platform, please make sure that you are, or the school is training the families so that everybody knows exactly how to use it, because this has been a big problem seen from the point of view of families as well, not knowing how to use that channel of communication. So my next tip here, this is tip number 6, and we're coming to the end. Tip number 6 is don't wait for families to reach out to you, because by then it might be too late for you to be able to fix the problem. By then it might be too late for you to improve the relationship, especially in the first weeks of a new school year or a new school term. Make an effort to contact families regularly. And I know this may seem like I'm here asking you to do something else on top of the already overwhelming number of jobs that you have to do. But listen, I promise you this, time invested in building relationships with the families and caregivers of your students is time that will pay off. It is well invested time. Check in. It's just checking in and seeing if they have any questions or suggestions. This doesn't need to be something complicated or time consuming. But this is going to sort of create this culture of communication and make them feel much more make them feel much more comfortable opening up to you if they need to. So the next tip here is about sending parents regular messages regarding the school's response to this changing situation, especially here in Brazil. I'm not sure about the context with you where you're in. But here in Brazil, literally from one week to the next, the mode of delivery can change. So teachers, just as at the start of this year, just as they were getting used to the hybrid mode of delivery, we went back into lockdown and everybody had to go home and work back online again. This can be really tough on everyone, but we need to establish realistic expectations. We need to start hearing the opinions about possibly opening, closing of the school in the future. Schools can do a lot in terms of relationship building simply by being transparent, honest, and here's that last one that's really important, open to hearing the opinions of families. And again, I'm going to now cite a real life example that's just happened in the school I mentioned earlier, the Secret Garden. This week, the Secret Garden is trying a new mode of delivery to try and keep their teachers safe, the health of their teachers safe. Teachers will be working from home and delivering lessons online, and the children will be coming to school so that they're not missing out on all of that interaction with their friends, that face-to-face interaction that we know is so important for students. The Secret Garden has an infrastructure where children can spend a lot of time outdoors playing as well. And they're in a very privileged position of having one group at a time, so that Lucy is there to supervise the students. Now, before the comment box, the chat box fills with that would never work at our school, that would be impossible. I understand that is a very context specific solution, but why am I sharing it? I'm sharing it because this might not work. This solution might not work. They might find by the end of the week it's not working out, and it might have to change again. But families won't get upset about that, and here's why. Because this decision was made in collaboration with families. There was a meeting where families were able to sort of come up with solutions in collaboration with the teachers and the school director. And this is what makes it different. This is what makes it more successful, is that there is this involvement, but also engagement. There is the school leading with their mouth and listening with their ears. So I thought that was a really interesting example, and I'll be following Lucy to see how that develops. So honesty, openness, and transparency. The next tip here is just this final, the 8th tip and the final tip here is about sharing health and safety procedures with families. And you know what? Many families are and will continue to be worried for a very long time about how you plan to keep their children safe, whether that's if you're returning to the classroom or have returned recently to the classroom. I think it's really a great idea to anticipate some of these questions by providing them, first of all, with the official health and safety guideline that the school's following, so that they know you've done your research and you're prepared for this. But you could also let them know how you plan to support the children emotionally during this new school year. I think that's going to be a big thing as well for, again, going back to this concept of a good relationship between family and home being based on mutual trust and mutual respect. So those were my 8 tips. Great, this is really interesting. I just wish I could keep up with all of this interaction that's happening in the chat box here. It's just wonderful. I will make sure I take a look after this webinar is over at some of these comments here. I hope you're all reading the comments as well to see what other people are sharing here. Okay, so Maria again has said that families react sometimes, families sometimes get offended when you have to inform them about something unpleasant, negative concerning their children. I'm so glad you brought this up. I'm so glad you brought this up because I think this is an awesome opportunity for me to now introduce you to another concept that has not come from education at all. It's come from Stephen Covey. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. He's the author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He has this concept that I like a lot, Maria, and I think you're going to like this too. This concept of credits in someone's emotional bank account. And it's the idea of you building up this relationship with someone. And if you have got enough credits in their emotional bank account, when it comes time to informing them about something unpleasant or negative concerning their children, you can make that withdrawal without it affecting the relationship in a negative way, without you going into the negative. So I think that's something important. This is why I've chosen to base all of these tips around actions that are going to help you get those credits in the emotional bank account with families, because we know that we're not going to get it right all the time. We know that this is new for everyone and we're having to make up a lot of things as we go along, but it's really important to have support and be supported. And the way to do this is really to make sure that you've invested time and resources in making family engagement, remember, not just leading with the mouth, not just traditional initiatives, but actually involving the parents in a more meaningful way. We need to build these relationships first. So I am really interested in building up an even bigger repertoire of ideas. So having listened to my 8 tips, having understood the difference between involvement and engagement, can you folks come up with some other suggestions of kinds of actions that teachers or school management teams can take to build these genuine trusting relationships, respectful relationships? So here's a comment. When you answer their emails or communicate with them when they send messages instead of neglecting them, this is absolutely a wonderful reminder. Really taking the time to answer those messages. Communication, let me have a look here. Organising some workshops with parents where we can involve parents in some important segments of education of their children. Galaxy J5, what a great suggestion. You might even be surprised with the talent and knowledge that you have among the families as well. It might be an opportunity to even invite parents to lead a workshop for others. Talk about building school community. Okay, the principal sends weekly emails updating them with the latest news, decisions and plans. Okay, good. This is leading with the mouth, but it's also really good, a good step. Let's see what other ideas we have. Organize a fun activity to involve parents and their children as well. Oh my goodness, that's a wonderful idea. idea. Building relationships, not just between school and family, but between school, family, and children. Let's see. Oh, Maria, what a lovely comment here. If children feel that they are loved, not only taught by teachers, their parents will respect and love us too. I think you've touched on something that's really important for us to remember. We're all on the same team. We all want the same thing, and that's the well-being and the education and the success of these kids. Involving everybody with productive activities and values is a must. I think that's something that's reminded me of one of the other really important factors in this framework that I keep referring to. It is this idea of the actions that we take need to be connected to children's learning. I think that's the kind of that's directly related to a lot of the expectations that families have of schools, is that we are working towards this goal of bettering the education. Organize a parent helper day where they get to get involved in class activities. Oh, I love that. Inviting parents to join and sit in a class with their kids and show them how we're teaching their kids in the new normal. This is a very interesting idea. Send packets where parents and children will do the art activity together. Wow. Look at all these fantastic suggestions in the comments here. Kristen, are you seeing this? Really good. Family day. I'm going to have to wrap this up, unfortunately, because we are running out of time. But before I do, I know that so many of you are already using National Geographic materials. So I just wanted to let you in on a little hack. A lot of these things may feel like they're incredibly time consuming. It may feel like an extra chore on top of what we're already doing, but let me tell you a little secret that not a lot of teachers are taking advantage of. In your course books, in most course books, in most platforms, you've got materials like this, ready to go materials that are going to help you build those homeschool connections. And some of these ideas that are here are linked to the suggestions that you've already been making. Do you know that your course books have these kinds of tools, that there are platforms for this already? Well, if you don't know, I urge you to go and check it out, because it might be exactly what you're looking for and save you a lot of time. So this brings me to the end now. As I promised, I have a slide here, which you'll be sent as well, with all of the references that I've used to put together this talk, but also some extra links there for anyone who wants to dive deeper into this wonderful topic. It's been a genuine pleasure to be here with you. You can probably tell it's a topic that I'm very passionate about and very concerned with professionally and personally. Just to end, I think we do have time for a little Q&A. Do we, Kristen?
We do. Thank you. And thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. We do have a couple more minutes. Do see a few questions here. One of them says, how do I help parents when they say, I don't know English, so how can I help my child?
This is a great question. And this is a question that I get asked frequently when we talk about this topic of family engagement. And this is what I think. I think that parents should never be expected to be teachers. You know, I think that would be a disservice to ourselves if we were to suggest that parents could start teaching. But we can encourage parents to get involved meet parents where they are at. You are always going to find parents who can do more and less in terms of supporting their children's education. And that's due to a large range of factors. Find out again, it comes to listening to parents, find out what they can do and start from there. Reassure them that they certainly don't need to speak English to be able to provide support. Find out what they can do, start from there and build your way up.
Wonderful. Okay, let's see.
I can see all of these lovely thank you messages. It's just been a pleasure. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you very, very much. Like I said, I'm going to send out the slides and a handout with you with these 8 tips. And I think there'll also be a blog post published as well. Is that right, Kristen?
Yes, absolutely.
Great, fabulous, fabulous. Okay.
Right, wonderful. Any additional questions? We do have a couple more minutes. A lot of thank yous. It's great to see.
I know, I'm just looking at this. What a lovely group. Thank you all very much. Oh, and do you know what, Kristen, if you scroll up, have you seen all of the lovely other ideas that are here as well?
Yes,
I'm going to have to dive in. I've just seen one for a lesson on family and for families to show the family tree, a family talent show. These are brilliant. These are brilliant ideas. For those of you who would like to stay connected, I have a community, a very large community of over 9,000 teachers on Instagram, and we're there all the time sharing, reflecting, learning together. So if you're on Instagram as well and you use Instagram for educational purposes, please come on over and join us there. My Instagram handle is Active English. That's the name of my business, Active English for Kids. I would love to keep this conversation going over there. If there are no other questions, if you'd like to ask me another question, if you have asked me another question and we haven't been able to answer it in this session, feel free to head over there and we can connect there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, thank you again so much, Claire. It's a wonderful presentation. And thank you to everyone that joined us today. Before we leave, I do have a few things to mention. Immediately after the session, you will be directed to a feedback survey to let us know what you thought. And as a reminder, we will be sending along a certificate of attendance and a recording of the session within about 3 business days of this webinar. If you are interested in learning more about National Geographic learning products for young learners of English, please visit eltngl.com/younglearners or contact your local NGL rep at eltngl.com/repfinder. And please be sure to join our online community for teachers of English on our social media channels, where we will offer up-to-date information about events, practical classroom tips, and exciting real-world content about new product information. So again, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Claire.